Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. Wanted to share with you one more time the latest COLA prediction. Now, COLA, cost of living adjustment. Now, the adjustments are never negative. They're always going to be either a zero or upward. So therefore, you're looking at an increase. So an increase in your benefits per month is what you'd be looking at for let's say VA compensation, dependency indemnity compensation, Social Security benefits, and so forth. Anything that's affected by the federal cost of living adjustment. Again, it's effectively an increase. I know sometimes people get a little wrapped around the axle with calling it a pay increase because it's not really a pay increase, it's an adjustment. However, it does increase the amount of pay that you're receiving. So with that, I found an article here on, USA Today, another one summing up the prediction. Now, remember that the true numbers for the CPIW that will be utilized in order to calculate the COLA will be July, August, and September CPI numbers. So that is the 3-month period that we'll have the look back on in order to calculate COLA. However, we are now in May. The numbers that came out recently were from April, and we're getting closer and closer, and we're seeing trends, and we're able to forecast and effectively come up with some sort of an estimate, if you will, on the COLA. So with that, let's jump into it. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I truly appreciate it. So the headline is Social Security's 2025 COLA estimate inches up, but Medicare Part B premium may wipe it out. Of course. Now, this is specific for veteran. However, for those of you that know, Social Security COLA is mirrored and then utilized for VA. So the Veterans Affairs does not determine their own COLA. They don't run the calculations. They don't do anything. They just adopt whatever Social Security uses. Now, every year, Congress has to authorize the VA to be able to mirror the Social Security cost of living adjustment. So anytime you hear Social Security COLA, you can basically just insert veterans or VA or veteran disability compensation or dependency indemnity compensation or whatever it ties to in with that. So let's jump into the article here. The latest estimate of Social Security cost of living adjustment for 2025 rose to 3.2%. This has been a very, very upward trend since January on what the estimates would be on COLA. It's very interesting that it keeps inching up, and who knows where we're going to land. But right now, if things stay as they are, we're looking at a COLA of in the threes at this point. So again, 3.2% after the government reported that April inflation was in line with economists' forecast. New calculations showed Wednesday. The 2025 COLA estimate, cost of living adjustment estimate, has risen all year as inflation remains elevated and above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. It stood at 1.75% in January. So just several months ago, we were looking at a 1.7% increase. In February, we were looking at a 2.4% increase. In March, we were looking at a 3%. Now, with overall prices increased 3.4% from a year earlier, down from 3.5% in March, according to the Labor Department's Consumer Price Index, a gauge of goods and really gouging your wallet, right? A gauge of goods and services costs throughout the economy. On a monthly basis, costs rose 0.3% below the 0.4% rise the previous month, but a rise nonetheless. So COLA is based on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. That's the CPIW. Now, there has been introduced on both the Senate and the House side different pieces of legislation that call for a different way to calculate COLA. Now, a lot of these, the two that I'm kind of referencing, which I don't have the actual names in front of me, both call for the utilization of the CPIE instead of the CPIW. The CPIE is the Consumer Price Index for elderly. It's a smaller index, so there's not as much data to work with. But if you were to do a switch out in years past, we would have seen on average about 0.25% higher adjustment each year on average. Now, 0.25% doesn't sound like much, but if you went back 20 years and started doing, well, 0.25%, 0.25%, also it's compounding interest, so it's percentages on top of percentages. So it would actually over time be a significant amount. Now, in the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year thing, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're adding up 10, a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, it can be substantial. So who knows what's going to happen with that. If you are in favor of a different way of calculating COLA, you might want to just reach out to your congressional rep and let them know that the current way is just not sufficient. It doesn't keep up with true inflation, especially for those that are receiving Social Security and veterans benefits, right? So we have different spending habits. There's a lot more focus on medical and that type of stuff, medications and so forth, even over-the-counter stuff. So anyway, let's jump back into this. So the CPIW is what is currently used. That figure dipped from 3.4% in March to 3.5%, dipped to 3.4% from March's 3.5%. So it's effectively the same, but it did have a small dip. But still outpaced the 3.2% COLA Social Security recipients began receiving back in January. The CPIW excludes the spending patterns of retired and disabled adults, most of whom receive Medicare benefits. There's a quotation here, the higher inflation indicates that consumers are still experiencing an erosion in buying power. And I'll tell you, I just had the conversation with my wife, feeling it too, right? Everybody's feeling it, whether you're at the gas station or you're in the grocery store. So there's this erosion in buying power, said Mary Johnson. She is now a retired Social Security and Medicare policy analyst for the nonprofit Senior Citizens League, who still tracks the data. So she's still actively involved in kind of tracking the data and probably just does that kind of on the side for them, which is great because she has done a pretty good job. Now, one thing with the Senior Citizens League and Mary Johnson specifically, the Senior Citizens League and Mary Johnson, both are strong advocates of changing how COLA is calculated because the majority of Social Security recipients are elderly and disabled. You can also look at veterans benefits and go, disabled, it's disability compensation. So the spending habits are different, and therefore there should be a different COLA calculation. Moving on here. Items on which seniors spend the most money increased significantly over the past year. Hospital services rose 7.7%. Transportation services soared 11.2%. Shelter jumped 5.5%. And electricity climbed 5.1%, the government said. What a wild ride. So with that, 3.2%. Increase is what we're looking at as a current projection as far as COLA is concerned. I'd like to see what your thoughts are if you've hung on to the end. Where do you think COLA is going to fall? It's been, if you drew a line, right, from January to today, we have seen an upward trend every single month. Is that going to turn anytime soon is the real question. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.